was really small at the time.
Canva was small at the time. In fact, the lead recruiter that I spoke with, Scott, he's still there. He's been there for 6+ years, almost as long as I built CodeCreate and Cody. But yeah, and then what I realized is the saying, people are saying like, bad founders in a good market, market wins. Good founders in a market, market wins. So I realized that we were trying to change the market from the university student. They didn't want it, but we were just trying to put it down for what they want. So it didn't work. And then lastly, the tech ecosystem in Australia wasn't very built out. It was still very small. There wasn't a lot of VC money going around. And so there wasn't a lot of capacity to hire software and entry-level software engineering level. You just think about the level of hierarchy that they're in. And they were looking for more senior people who would just come in and just start building and adding value. So it was actually very difficult to make that work using that model. And then eventually we ran out of money and then Mitch left. I was struggling to do everything on my own again. And I was extremely burnt out. I need to take a break.
And you've written before that Cody was actually a vital part of your identity, and having to quit basically left you a dark hole inside. I mean, what was the plan after that?
Yeah, growing up, my academic, which they translate into work achievements, have always been a huge part of how I measure my self-worth. This is the first time in my life where I've actually put down my sword and go, okay, guys, I'm out of gas. I don't find anything left. I was going so far negative, I got nothing left. I think people around me could see that. Like I was 25, so as any people would, they go traveling. I had less than 10K at the time and I needed to rebuild my finances. One of my friend I met throughout this period, he was like, do you want to come to Vietnam? I was like, yeah, I'll be here on Tuesday. I booked a ticket to go to Ho Chi Minh, which is Saigon. He just sent me a hostel address and I'm literally jumping on a plane to go to a foreign country to meet a friend at a hostel. I got scammed right out of the airport with the taxi drivers. Obviously, they just charged me triple or something.
It looked like you had a lot of fun. You charted quite a lot of it on your Instagram. And you were punting, the Vietnamese version of punting on the river as well. There was this lady who was selling a $1 lantern. You bought all of it.
Yeah. Vietnam was a lot of fun. I think I just party and de-stress. The rest of it has been a lot about soul searching. And I continue to do that across different cities and different countries across the world. One of the things that I learned throughout that journey was, despite how hard things may seem, I learned that in many ways, I was very lucky because I'm suddenly in a world where it was even more underdeveloped than Taiwan, where I was from. And this grandma who was super old, standing there trying to sell these lanterns, and she would have sold everything. I asked her, how many do you have? And like she counted, and it was like, it wasn't much. And as she sold them $1 at a time, she would have only made $50 that day. And no one was buying it. She was standing there. It was late at night. It was 10 p.m. And obviously like $50 was a lot for me at the time, but I feel it would mean so much more to her than it would mean for me if I had just spent that. I'll just go bunk in a hostel, right? And so I gave it to her and my friend who was with me at the time, and she took a photo of the whole thing.
She looked really happy. In spite of what you've explained of her situation, she looked really, really happy.
Yeah. And I think later on, I realized being able to give to people have been one of the biggest kind of joy in my life. And so that's also become one of my life's highest values. And so throughout that, I realized I had so much to be grateful for in my life, despite losing pretty much all the finances I had at the time, losing the career ladder I've been building so hard towards. I also realized I lost a lot of friends, but then throughout all that journey, I realized I actually have other real friends who were there. Giving the money to the grandma was one of them, and where I realized I was so grateful and so fortunate that I get to be in a position to give that to her.
You actually wrote a really long blog post about the entire experience. And one of the things that I took away from that was that you said that it's important to ask your friends, your family, your mentors for their read on you, because it's a good way of telling who you are. So were you doing that as well while finding yourself on this journey? And what was the plan after all that?
Yeah, that was one of the questions I go around asking people the most. And I met this guy who was a close friend of my mentor. He built this like car cushion factory, and he does about 50 mil a year at the time. He employed 2,000 people. And so he ended up taking me to dinner, we talked and stuff. And then toward the end, I just go, hey, so before we finish, I want to ask you this. What's your read of me? And then I tell them the thing. And
any surprising things that you learned from people?
I think they may come across as a surprise at first. But then once you sit with it for a little bit, I think deep down, we all kind of knew who we were. A good example of what I said earlier was when I sat down last year at my university, I was like, okay, I like technology, I want to teach, and I like kids. The answer for me was, I didn't like where that was going to lead me, but they were the truth. Some friends who will be very honest with you. And I think it's on us as well to be open-minded, to not be defensive and to kind of take those in. So the positive as well as the things to improve and things to work on. Because I think like ultimately people share not out of spite or trying to put you down. They share because they want a possibility of building a better relationship with you as opposed to take it apart.
So one of the persons that you met was Andre. How did that happen? Because he was pivotal in you getting your first proper job, right?
Yeah, people who probably don't know, I met a guy called Andre who was the first hire in product and growth at Canva, who later became the head of growth there, who ran all the growth counterparts. I bumped into him because I was doing a bit of contract side work while I was so I spent the time in traveling Southeast Asia. It was really cheap to rebuild up CodeCreate and rebuild up the business so that I could be in a financially stable-ish place. But then doing that's really tough. I took on a few contractor gigs with my friend who's building this other company. So his name's Rob. We both have this thing where we're both extremely curious. And so he will learn something, he'll share them with me. And I'll try and learn it and stuff like that. And so obviously through this journey of learning, part of the thing we want to learn was how do we build better companies? How do we build better things? We would do LinkedIn outreach to people and ask them to mentor us. Rob came up with this thing. I couldn't do it because I wasn't like rich enough, but he would go message people and he would go, hey, I recently came up with your profile, blah, blah, blah. I really liked it. I was hoping to ask you to teach me about how you did X or Y. So he actually did this to a lot of famous people. He did it to like the guy who wrote Atomic Habits, James Clear, and he actually got conversation with James Clear and lots of different people.
Oh, wow. So what was the success rate and how many people took up
I think it was
that?
pretty high, but then there's a caveat because when you reach out to these people, you don't really know how good they are until you deeply know their work and get to know them. And so the caveat here is anyone who would want to make the 500 from you, they're actually not that great because anyone who's like done great work and made their due wouldn't care about the 500. Yeah. They would just do it. So it was actually a bit of a test on the other side as well.
It's a bit like Clubhouse, right? Where there were so many rooms of people teaching others how to be rich.
Exactly.
Rich,
it's like the most successful people, they don't make a course to teach people how to be rich unless they're really passionate about just building things. Right? But in this case, this is purely an exchange of service. That's what he did. And then I follow along. And that's how we reach out to Andre. And yeah, obviously Andre totally like passed it and just we had a chat. And then we ended up from the first conversation where like we were kids trying to fumble around, trying to figure things out. And we're like, wow, this guy's like Yoda, but in growth and product. And yeah, we were learning about the early days of Canva, how he built certain things. And I really admired the way he thinks and how he approached problems and stuff like that, strategic and also like business growth perspective. So we did that for like a month, like in parallel and also learning from his work at Canva. Andre introduced me to some of the team that he built at the time, and they were like all around my age. So I actually became friends with some of them. Months later, Andre was looking to transition out of Canva. He actually joined this other company called AirTasker at the time. Now I know one of the first things you do is that you got to build your team. You can't do everything yourself, which I'm going through now. But yeah, he was building his team and he was like, hey, what are you doing? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm doing a bit of contract work for Rob and then I'm just chilling out in Ubud in Bali and playing with monkeys. I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm running my coding school on the side, trying to make a bit of passive income. And so Andre's like, well, I'm going to AirTasker and I'll be hiring. So if you want to come back, let me know. I sat on it for 2 weeks. And then at the time we returned back to Australia, I reached out to Andre on LinkedIn. I did my version of the outreach without the money. I don't offer the 500 because I actually couldn't pay it. Like Rob actually pays it to find out the answers. I wasn't prepared to do that. I was prepared to pay like 50, 100. That's where I was at. It would be an insult, but they wouldn't take it as nicely. So instead of doing that, I did the work, right? I read the thing about doing cold outreach. You know, people just send you outreach and expect you to give you their time and you've done no work. So I realized that, okay, well, if I'm reaching out to people who are more accomplished than me at the time, I need to do the work. And so I went and scoured the internet and social media of every piece of thing that they've ever written, they've ever shared, everything they've ever worked on. I went really deep. I try and understand what they do, how they think and stuff like that. And then I will share that in a conversation in the first message. And they will realize like, wow, I've gone through so much depth to learn about who they are. And that's how I did my approaches. I did that with school outreach and I later applied that to these kind of stuff.
I did that too. I reach out to people and you get that comment saying, oh, because it was such a thoughtful email, I would love to speak with you.
It makes sense. People just do it and they don't think about it. They just stop for a moment and think. You're asking them for time. And if they're working in a scaling up company, they're really busy. It's not that they don't want to help. So yeah, I came back, I reached out to Andre on LinkedIn. I also made an application and I went through a lot of his early blogs. And then he was like, look, I'll hire you, but you got to go through the HR process.
Because AirTasker now is the largest marketplace for services in Australia, but at the time it was burning $30 million annually. So that job could be
It didn't bother me at all because for me, I had nothing to lose at this point. I burnt the career that I was trying to build to the ground. One of my inspirations was Steve Jobs, and the other one is Jack Ma, who built Alibaba at the time, was massive 5 years ago. And he had this famous saying, everybody wants to start a company in this. Don't rush. I spent my 20s working at KFC and then being a teacher. And that taught me a lot of things I need to learn to build Alibaba during my 30s. And so he talked about spend your 20s learning, spend your 30s building. When you haven't built something, spend your 40s working and excelling, like at something, and then spend your 50s mentoring, giving back, and then 60s are for family and whatever. So, okay, I'll take a slower step. And so one of my big focus was I wanted to find a place where I can learn. The side of the business was burning actually excited me. I read all these things on building startup, but I don't know how to apply them. Andre, I said to him, look, yeah, I'm excited. I want to come. I want to learn, and I feel like I've read all these things, but it's until I actually go do them, do I actually learn something? And I think he really liked that. And later I reflected on it, that is a quality that I want to see in someone that I hire, is that they want to get their hand dirty. And that kind of taught me an important lesson in life, which is within every crisis, there's an opportunity waiting to be discovered. The crisis of the business create a new opportunity for the business to innovate. In a wartime. And so one of the early things we did as we built out the growth team there, we engineered what we call growth loop. So it was, what is this mechanism that allows the company to grow? And we needed a different one to grow because the current one is burning so much money that the business will die if we don't do that in 6 to 9 months. Clearly, the founding team at the time didn't know what to do because otherwise it wouldn't be there in the first place. You have a lot of freedom and autonomy to go do things, and that creates an environment where you get to go and touch a lot of different things and learn from that.
What was the thing that helped to turn it around? Because then it was growing by 50% year on year, right?
It's a long kind of process, but instead of just thinking, oh, you do marketing and product, they're all interconnected. And I think that's what ultimately growth is. Growth, look at it holistically and you combine everything together. And I think my engineering background helped a little bit in the sense that you apply an engineering thinking, a systems thinking to a problem. And so essentially we look at the company as they have multiple different parts of the system, but it all works as a whole. And so one of the systems that was failing and that was burning a lot of money was that this company was built on brand marketing and a lot of handing out gift cards to people. And one of the fundamental things that we think was not working was there's no need to double this company. It's not the job of brand marketing to do that. And the other thing with handing out gift cards, one is very hard to attribute. You're losing money fast, right? Say that your money is going out to pay for this rent and you don't have an income. You definitely want to be very clear about every dollar you spend, how well is that being spent, as opposed to just spending it. And I think the company wasn't doing that. The last thing was when you hand out discounts to acquire customers, it fundamentally attracts different kind of customer who only tried your product, not because they truly have a very painful problem. They're, because there's a discount. So I think if you don't find the right kind of customer you're looking for. And so one of the first things we did was we rebuilt the customer acquisition engine. A lot of this great work's done by Andre and Elise. And so one of the things we discovered was AirTasker in many ways is Amazon. The competitive advantage of a company is that we are a massive directory of not goods, but services. And we have people behind those services all over the region. And through that, you are able to create a massive content directory on the web. And similar to Amazon, a lot of people search for these problems. A lot of people search for like Amazon search for like this book name, or people search for a certain product and services with the intent to want to buy them or compare them. We can suddenly do that with services that people are looking for. So cleaner, they're trying to compare cleaner, they're trying to find a removalist. They're trying to find a handyman for certain things. And they were able to do that. We realized it was like, it's a horizontal marketplace as opposed to a vertical one, which means we focus across everything and anything as opposed to focus on a niche, which is very counterintuitive to what most people advise in startup. In post-mortem, I think our belief was we don't think AirTasker would have survived as a specialized niche because you don't have the enough revenue market sizes for you to build out, say, if you just focus on, we just do cleaning, right? We just do delivery. The other thing was liquidity in marketplace is really important. It's about network effect. And so how quickly can you book something on demand? Uber, how quickly can you get Uber there is really important. And so being able to have workers who can jump across different verticals, or they can be acquired through one vertical, but then also say, I can work in this other vertical. becomes really valuable and integral to the experience of the marketplace and how quick people can get the help that they need, which adds to the value of the product. We re-engineer how we acquire users through building content directories and generating those, and then looking for problems that people are searching for, comparing, very similar to how Amazon kind of build out their directory engines. So we took a lot of learning from Amazon. And then the other thing we kind of started doing was, instead of just doing these like very expensive pay TV brands, we still do them. We realized there is a place for it, but it just wasn't well understood. We later understood like brand has an important place in terms of when you need to do a complex or expensive services, trust is very important. And so you actually need to build brand to help convert people. And so a lot of another counterintuitive thing that people think about is, oh, people are like not converting to become paid customers. It's because you have too many steps. You need to like make it simple. I think that is true. It applies to a lot of certain product, but it didn't apply to us. In fact, like we added more steps into the product, and it actually increases customer conversions, because when you want something complex like a remove list, we actually added things like, what are the furnitures? What do the things look like? And that actually makes a customer deeply trust us, because they know that we understand the problem and how to solve it. And we actually then help them match better workers for that job. So that was like all these like really counterintuitive things. We have to think from like first principle and rediscover. The last thing probably around that system, obviously we did overhaul for a lot of different parts of the company. But the last thing kind of looked at was, instead of doing this really expensive brand marketing, we realized is that there's a new engine that we could build that is free. And we do that through partnerships. So what happened was we could actually partner up with a mattress company in Australia. And what we did was, oh, we want you to test mattresses, and we'll pay people. We'll put up a thing on our platform, say, we'll pay you $2,000 to test sleep on this mattress for a night and leave a review. And that goes viral because people are like, wow, you're going to pay me like $5,000, $2,000 to go sleep on a mattress. And so people start competing, and that gets shared around socially so much. It blew up, and then it became very easy for us to get free TV coverages. Instead of as TV ads, it becomes a newsworthy thing that we can like pitch to TV station and stuff. And we could repeat that over and over again for virtually very little cost, as opposed to paying like hundreds of thousands of dollars on TV ads. We could repeat that over and over again. So we did like puppies. We will partner up with dog walking services, or we can partner up with like Guide Dog Australia or something like that. And then these things become like socially shared, and they just get massive coverages, which builds to the brand and get the name out there. But there was some examples. Obviously, there was much more.
So AirTasker ended up IPOing in 2021, but you left before that. Why would you leave when the company is doing so well?
Yeah, I think again, right, like if you look at like why I started the work and why I started the role, I was driven by curiosity, and I was driven, I think the way I put it, I was driven by growth. Like I value growth, and I'm curious, and I want to learn, I want to keep growing. That's kind of where I was. I think like for anyone who's kind of gone through an IPO, or for those who haven't, I guess the mentality of a company building towards IPO is one that is fairly conservative. It's not something that you will want to take big bets. Essentially, you want to continue what you're doing, and a lot of your focus, a big part of your focus is to go prepare for a successful public offering. And so I think the business towards the tail end of that 6 month focus a lot more on that. And then post IPO, I think it becomes a very different company, because now you're managing public expectations and stuff. And so I think part of the sentiment was a lot of the big bets that we wanted to take, that we were able to take, we essentially stripped out entire functions of the company and told them this is no longer required, and be able to reinvent how things work. Over time, we start to lose more and more of that, right? Like, yeah, so I was exploring what does my next step look. And so that was one of the reasons I left. And ultimately, Sabah, the current founders from VEED, we connected, he kind of reached out, was looking for head of growth. And we connected it through LinkedIn again. And he kind of said, hey, would you be interested in joining VEED? At like, it was just around 10 people at the time. And it took me a few months of just learning about Sabah, learning about the team, and kind of deciding. And then ultimately I was, yep, okay, I'll come. And then I make the leap.
And VEED has really grown in this period of time. So what was your task when you first joined, and how has it changed over time?
Yeah, VEED has grown a lot over the last 18 months since I've been there. The company, for one, has gone from 10 to 100 plus people. It was bootstrapped throughout its time until a month ago. We've recently closed our first fundraising round with Sequoia of 35 million. Throughout that period, obviously, because we were bootstrapped, so the people count means like our revenue, our profit grew along with the hiring at a profitable rate. So my learning along with that, I guess, yeah, me and Sabah talked about this. It was like every 3 months, we would have a conversation and be like, I think your job is now this, and I need to go do that new job. We have to constantly do new things. So like the first little bit was I was doing a lot of things with my hands dirty, because that was a big value part that I've learned from AirTasker and learning mastery and watching Andre work was he was not just a VP that told people what to do. He knew deeply how to do those things, and he could spot the difference between good and great and amazing and world-class from a mile away. And I really admire that in a manager and in someone who built things is, yeah, they ultimately knows what they're doing. Not all of it, but the part that they do know, they deeply understand it. It's mastery, right? Like it's an Olympic athlete in many ways. They do one thing, they do it really well. And so a lot of the early stages have been me getting my hands dirty again and building those things and communicating to the founders like, hey, this is what I'm going to do. This is what's going to change in the department. I'm going to kill all these things and focus on these and just proving that out over the next few months and making sure we are winning based on those things to build that trust and build that direction with the team and with everyone in the company. And then very quickly that transition into running the team a little bit and then doing it alongside them, coaching them, to having more stakeholders in the company and how we restructure, how we like divide up roles and responsibilities, what's the strategy, and then going to like, okay, we got to keep running the team. But then we started having to talk with like a lot of VCs for fundraising and stuff like that. Do we raise? Do we not raise? We also receive a lot of acquisition offers from really big brand companies that you would definitely heard of. And it was also a big decision, I guess, for the team, but mostly for Sabah and the founders around what is their why for building VEED, because the exit would have netted them like hundreds of millions. So obviously now looking at that, they didn't proceed with it. It's something that you really have to dig into your why to kind of answer the question off. To, I guess, now post a raise, it allows us at VEED to think about, instead of like living month to month, literally paycheck to paycheck as a company, we can now think about investing into our product, solving problems on a much longer time horizon, and without having to always have to look for a return on the next month. Otherwise, we will be burning cash and that would be very stressful.
You said that you're also hiring as well. So can you give a bit of insight just in terms of who you're looking for, what they can expect?
Yeah, I think at VEED, what we're hiring for changes from time to time. Right now, we're hiring a lot and it's up on our job pages, so you can check that out. Or you can, if you're interested, you can kind of just DM me on Twitter. I think that's easier because my DM's open. Otherwise, I'm on LinkedIn too. So I think one of the big things in the company is that we really value kind of support between the people and stuff like that, and just looking after the people. And so that was one of the core things that we look for in people that we hire. Other thing I guess we look for beyond from that aspect of the culture of the team is that we look for people who think for themselves. Their first principle, they kind of like go off their own why, I guess, in the theme of this podcast. And I think people that often jump into very ambiguous, unclear problems at some point in their life, whether it's through my journey of starting a company or they decided to go be a reporter and speak 7 different languages. Or, there's several people, right? One of them is a YouTuber, one of them decided to become an influencer, one of them decided to quit investment banking to teach disability kids and write poetry. Just people who solve really like difficult problems in their life. Because I think if you're able to solve difficult problems in other contexts, I think you'd be able to solve difficult problems in the context of building a fast-growing tech company. I think people who are growth-minded, I think that's always great, because if you're always learning and you've always been learning, it's inevitable that you will become better over time. I think people who communicate well being a really critical one. So as the company scales, how you clearly communicate with everybody around this is what I'm doing, here's why it's important, and be able to not just like be able to communicate to your manager, your team, but also be able to rally different people to come and get excited about the course that you're doing. People always say like, oh, they want a flat company structure. They hate hierarchies. Well, if you don't have hierarchy, then you got to be really good at influencing and exciting people on here's what we need to go do next. So those are important.
And that's interesting because VEED is actually remote first. So you have to be able to do that virtually.
Yeah, you got to do that virtually. So VEED is remote first. So at 10 people when I joined, we have teams from 3 different continents. Now at 100 plus people, we have people from all the continents on the face of the earth. We don't have anyone from Antarctica, but we don't count that. And so, a lot of your communications are remote. There's no office, there's no face-to-face. A lot of the communications are asynchronous, and a lot of communications are with people who are from very different cultural backgrounds to you. And I realized is the communication styles of people are very, very different. And you got to seek to like understand and learn and be curious about that too. And so those are all kind of key things. The last bit of thing I would add is I personally think I really value, I think as a team, we really value originality. Again, a very conventional thing, like people say in startup, it's like, oh, ideas are cheap, execution is everything. I think there's truth in that, but I would say ideas aren't cheap. I think if we've worked on this problem full time for years, and here we met someone who come in propose a new idea that has a massive impact and is able to explain to us very quickly why that is, I think that adds a lot of value to the team. And so we really value originality and how people approach their why again behind how they arrive at that answer, which are usually non-conventional. It's not like, oh, this other company do it, so you should do it too. But it's like, well, if you think about it, this makes sense. And they're not obvious. So yeah.
So speaking of whys, do you feel like you have found your why after this entire journey?
I think I haven't. I think there are parts that I think are important to me and I get a lot of fulfillment out of them in my life, and I'll continue to do them. So things I think I already mentioned a little bit around giving back, curiosity and growth. Other things that, I really value in the day-to-day has been like health and other things like that. On a high level, directionally, I think I'm roughly correct directionally. And these are very value driven. And then I'm kind of more experimenting. The part I'm figuring out isn't the big direction, but it's more like incrementally, how do I get closer and closer to that? Which I don't know if I want to talk about, but the perfect day we spoke about briefly.
Go for it.
Yeah, I think like one of the exercises I started doing was this exercise called like your perfect day. And essentially it's an exercise where if you were to sit down at any point in your life right now and think about what would your perfect day look like? Even if you were to have one day left on this planet, if you were to have a year left, 5 years, 10 years left, how would you live that perfect day over and over again? And I think it's really important to go through this exercise because a lot of us set goals. Oh, I will want to start my own business. I will want to make this much money. I want to buy a house. But these are in the future. And the truth is you only experience things right here and now, the present, the day that you have. That's all you've got. And so when you start to set that, it becomes a very different experience of like, how am I getting there? Is what I'm doing today aligned with things I'm talking about? And if it's not, do I really want those things? Or is there something I need to change in my day to get me closer to that? The other realization is you start to realize a lot of things in your perfect day are actually very achievable and you've been putting it off in your life for way too long than you realized. So in my perfect day, one of the things was I want to wake up early in the morning and go exercise, whether that's a surfing or something. Now I've recently started boxing in the morning. And so, yeah, doing something like that. And that is really achievable for me to do right now. It means, say I have 18 hours waking day and I do boxing for 2 hours, I'm more than just over 10% towards my perfect day already, just by waking up early in the morning and going to do boxing and meditating. I want to have my breakfast. That's already my perfect day. And then what I want to do for work, or I want to work with great, amazing people. And I've been moving myself towards that. And I think at VEED, we definitely have a huge element of that. You realize you can start moving very clearly towards what you need. It's much more actionable, much more clear you can do today, which is quite empowering for anyone to realize. So yeah, that's the perfect day exercise.
Do you think in the longer term, what kind of a legacy you want to leave behind?
Yeah, I know we spoke about this. I don't think about what kind of legacy I want to leave behind. I think about how I want to help people and give back. And I will figure out how to do that to the best of my ability. And in terms of, again, like setting a legacy, I think it's something that is in the future. And a lot of it might not be within my control. So I think where I felt most power and most empowered and do my best work was when I'm playing and having fun. And also like just, like when I was teaching and building courses for kids around technology, when these courses did not exist at all, like anywhere in the world for that matter. And so that's kind of been my approach towards it.
So what do you think are the most important qualities of a successful person?
I don't know. I think success are defined by everyone. This concept called a time billionaire. And the concept very simple, essentially says Warren Buffett is super rich. And in many ways, people think of him as super successful in his field. But if I were to give you a chance to switch life with him, most people wouldn't take it because they don't have time. Similarly, I applied this to me and Steve Jobs. It's like Steve Jobs, super successful role model in many ways of building things, designing things, and marketing things. But would I switch my life with his? I probably wouldn't, given how he lived and stuff like that. And so I think success in one way is about recognizing that, like having your own original thoughts and opinion and knowing what those are and what you truly value and discovering those. And then be able to spend the only one thing that is uncertain that we have, which is your time, be wealthy in your time in spending it around the thing that you truly value. Success is a story that many people, listen to others tell them, or other people tell themselves, or the movie tells you about. But ultimately, just try to be a time billionaire and spend on the things that you deeply value. For me, that's my health, freedom, that's giving back to people, that is deep and meaningful relationship with friends and family. I think at VEED, we had this conversation once with Saban. It was post the decision of, does he want to sell or does he want to continue? And this thing made an impression on me that kind of I hold on to now. And that's one of my guiding principles, which is we have very short amount of time here in this life. And so the best way to spend it is to spend time with good friends and family that we love, go build cool stuff that we have fun doing. And then with the other time we have left, just go and travel and explore different cool corners of the world that's there for us to explore and travel and available to us. And that's it.
And where can people go to connect with you, find out more about what you're doing at VEED?
If you want to find me, I have my website, vincentwei.co, which I also write my newsletter to talk a bit more about, I guess, like financial education. I've been getting into like crypto, NFT, and I've been a bit more open of how I've built my own finances and my investments and stuff or businesses really, all of those as a pursuit of freedom, as a pursuit of how do I then be able to do that so that I have more time to go and spend on my health, like spending with my friends and family and all that kind of stuff. The newsletter's called New Wealth. It's on Substack. And then I'm also on Twitter, which is at Vinny Wei, VINNI, and then my last name, WEI. Like I said, my DM is open. So if you're curious, you want to come and work at VEED, or you just want to reach out and connect, yeah, I'd love to hear from you and hang out.
And I'll include all those in the show notes so people can find you easily. And is there anything else before we close that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I think reflecting back on this journey, I realized that I am very lucky and very fortunate. While it's not all smooth and bumps, but I've met a lot of amazing people through just verse connecting us and things happens. So I just want to say thank you to all those people. Obviously, like my parents, my family, but also a lot of the people that I've encountered through work, and also my friends who supported me through some of these not so fun times, and the people who like talk to me and who's decided to open their doors to me and stuff like that. Yeah, thank you and super grateful. And it's become one of the driving forces of why I want to do that back to others as well, where I can, when I can. So yeah, thank you.